Okay, so in the previous lesson where we left off, we used the entity framework to get a collection of customers from the database. You recall we used a DB set, we converted it to a list, we got customers from the database, then we data bound that list of customers to a grid view control. And eventually what I want to do with that example is to abstract out all of the data access code into a persistence layer. We're growing towards that. We're not quite there yet. Maybe in the next lessons we'll get to that point. What I wanted to do was take a moment and stop down and talk about why in the curriculum that you see all over LearnVisualStudio.net that there are two paths to go down. We have what we call a tools-driven or tools-centric approach to developing applications, and then a maintenance-driven or maintenance-centric approach to building applications. And the ways that you develop software will dramatically differ based on which of those two that you choose. So what I want to do now is just show you a quick example of what we did in the previous video, but use a totally tools-driven process. In other words, I don't want to write any code at all. I just want to drag and drop my way to success. And I'm going to show you how easy it is, but we're also at the very end of this going to talk about some of the downsides of taking that approach. So as you can see, I have on my screen right now the local DB example opened up again. Things are a little bit different on this. I've got rid of several of the pieces that you've come accustomed to in the previous lessons. For example, I got rid of that entity model that we created. I removed settings from the web config. So what you want to do is you want to download the code from this lesson, number 6, CSASP_062. You want to go to the before folder and copy that into your projects directory if you want to follow along with me. You can pause the video right now and you can catch up to me right where I'm at. Okay, so like we talked about in the previous video, if you take a look at the toolbox on the left-hand side, there's a data section. And we talked about the data controls in ASP.NET. And there's really two different kinds. There's data sources. Where do I find my data? And then the data controls themselves. Now that I've found the data, how do I acquire it? How do I render it in a way that I can, display it to the end user? So what we're going to start by doing is add, first of all, a data source and configure it, and then we'll add the grid view and configure it to look at the data source. We said that the data source components are they're not viewable. They're just here. Let's just take a look at it. Let's drag and drop a SQL data source onto the design surface, and you can see the little tasks menu comes out to the right hand side. We'll get to that in just a moment. But as a result of dragging and dropping this onto the form, the end user will not see anything that resembles or has any output from this particular control. It's a non-visual control. It's just there to provide information to other controls on our form. So I'm going to go ahead in the tasks menu and click this configure data source link, and it opens up the configure data source menu. And here we get to create a new connection to our database. We want to make sure to select the Microsoft SQL Server database file because we're working with LocalDB, the LocalDB version of SQL Server. Click OK there. And then I want to browse for the file itself. And so we know where that's at. It's in our projects directory for our LocalDB example. And then in that project directory /appdata. Remember, that's the special folder where the LocalDB files are stored. And we'll go ahead and select that in the dialog and click Open. And now I'll just click the Test Connection button to make sure that we're good to go. And we are. That's awesome. So let's click OK to that. And I'm going to click OK to that. Okay. And I'm going to expand the connection string. It didn't seem... Oh, there we go. There we go. So you can see that it displays what the connection string will be. That's great. We'll select the next button. It asks the name of the connection string and the web.config that we want to use. The default is just fine. Let's go ahead and click the next button there. These things are starting to look familiar, right? This is how we created an entity data model in a couple of lessons ago. So here again, I'm going to go ahead and select the customers table. It's already pre-selected for us. I want all the columns, so we just leave that first checked. We can filter, order, and do things of that nature to this data source. I'm going to leave all the defaults selected and click the next button. I'm going to test the query to see if it brings back data successfully, and it does. It brings back the one record we have in our database. I'll click Finish. And so now our SQL data source is configured and it's ready to be used. If we take a look at the source in this .aspx file, Okay, so taking a look at the markup for the SQL data source, there's really nothing all that interesting about it here. You can see there's a connection string property, and it has this funky nomenclature, and what that's going to do is just pull the connection string from the web.config, okay? And then there's a select command, and there's not much else. That's because this is a very simple case. If we'd chosen more options on that dialog, we would have seen a lot more filled in here. We're good to go. Now, the next part of this is really simple. We've done it before. I'm going to drag and drop the grid view control from the toolbox onto the design surface, and I'm going to choose a data source. Currently it's selected to none. I'm going to choose the name of that SQL data source 1. And as you can see, automatically it fills in the header information for our grid view. That's kind of cool. It gives us a design time preview of what we will actually see when we run this application. We can do some other interesting things like enable paging, sorting, selection. Not going to do that in this series. When we come back to the ASP.NET Web Forms for Absolute Beginners series, we'll thoroughly investigate the grid view. We can format, the look and the feel of it as well. We can also change the CSS to style it up any way that we want. But we're good to go for now. We chose the data source, and let's go ahead and save our project, and then click the Run button and see this thing work. Now remember, we didn't write any code to get the exact same results here that we got in the previous video. Again, we're taking a tool-centric approach to building the application. Now, the tool-centric approach basically allows you to use Visual Studio, its wizards, its property windows, and things of that nature to, again, as I use the phrase, drag and drop your way to success. You don't have to write much code in order to get some pretty awesome results. And you might say, well, then why are we learning how to code? That sounds like, why wouldn't we do this? Well, what I wanted to do with this was to highlight the differences between a maintenance-driven approach and a tools-driven approach. The tools-driven approach, yes, it's fast. However, it's a bad long-term strategy. It might work for a small departmental application where you only have a few users and you don't expect a lot of change. However, if you have a large application and you expect there to be ongoing maintenance and changes to the application over time, this is not the right approach when building an application. All right, so I want to drive that home. We'll see a better approach in the next lesson when we talk about developing that persistence layer, when we talk about dependency injection and some of those concepts. So what I want to do now is I want to show you another approach to doing what we did right here, and I want to show you how Visual Studio even makes it easier than the few things that we did. You're going to be amazed at this. This is really, really cool. So I'm going to go to the, make sure that our project name is selected in the Solution Explorer, and then I'm going to go to the project menu and select Add New Item. The Add New Item dialog pops open. We want to choose a new web form, and we'll just leave it at the default name, webform1.aspx. Click the Add button. All right, now I'm going to go to the design view on our webform1.aspx file. Now watch this. I'm going to go to the Server Explorer. Okay, we're going to go to our data connections. We're not connected to our local DB example just yet. I expanded. Now you can see the little green plug like we talked about before. I'm going to drill down to the tables, drill down to customers. I select customers. Now watch this. I'm going to drag the customers table and drop it on our form, and there we go. You can see that it automatically created a SQL data source for us. It knew which database we're trying to connect to, so it created all the connection strings and everything for us. If we take a look at the Solution Explorer, take a look in our web.config, it added a connection string for us. Very cool. And then it added a grid view control. Why? Because that would be the default behavior. I mean, after all, if you want to work with a table, why wouldn't you want to see it in a grid view? Obviously. And then it configures that grid view to have the SQL data source as its data source. Now I'm going to go ahead and click the Run button on Visual Studio, and you can see that we get the exact same results. Okay, tools-driven approach. Visual Studio makes it very easy to go down this route, and you should, for small applications where you don't expect to be a lot of change, where you don't expect there to be a lot of business logic that you have to implement for the application. It's going to be more difficult to plug in. It's going to be more difficult to make changes long term, and you'll see that manifested as we talk about the persistence layer and all the options there. All right, but that's all I wanted to demonstrate in this video, is to kind of start the process of explaining to you why we're going down two different roads. And you're going to ask me, which one should I learn? And I'll say, you should learn both. You should go down both paths eventually. If you are going to become an enterprise software developer, you definitely need to know the maintenance-driven architectural approach to building applications. But when your manager comes to you and say, hey, I need an application really quick, I just need a report with this information on it, and I need it by tomorrow morning, think you could get that done? Absolutely. What he's asking for is that you throw it together as fast as possible, and Visual Studio will make it easy for you to do that. Okay? So let's pick it up in the very next video. We're going to build out that persistence layer. We'll see you there. Thank you.